I posted a verse from Hosea 4:6, where Hosea prophesies, and it says, "My people are being destroyed because they don't know me." My people are being destroyed because they don't know me, by a lack of knowledge. That word knowledge in the Hebrew was da'ath, and the real definition of that word is awareness, because they're not aware of me, and they're not aware of who I am. And so tonight I want to spend a few minutes doing a little bit of teaching. This is what I feel that God has called me to do, and the calling that He's placed on my life. And I think back to a story and a situation that is in two different books of the Bible, but the one we're going to go with right here is 1 Chronicles, and we're going to go from 13 to 15. I'm going to read a little bit, so bear with me. But I believe that knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our relationship with God. This story is when David was bringing the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel and the problems that he faced. David had a vision and the understanding that Israel needed the Ark of the Covenant, which was a housing of the presence of God. And it had been lost and was away from Israel for hundreds of years. And so David had the right unction in his heart. But we're going to go over some things and see where maybe he went wrong and then he corrected himself. But 1 Chronicles chapter 13. I'm reading from New Living Translation. If you have a Bible Hub app, or if you have one, it's probably the most accurate translation that is out today. David consulted with his officials, including the generals and captains of his army. Then he addressed the entire assembly of Israel as follows: "If you approve, and it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send messages to all the Israelites throughout the land, including the priests and Levites in their towns and pasture lands. Let us invite them to come and join us. It is time to bring the ark of our God, for we neglected it during the reign of Saul." Verse 4, the whole assembly agreed to this, for the people could see that it was the right thing to do. So David summoned all of Israel from the Shihor brook of Egypt in the south, all the way down to the town of Lebo Hamath in the north, to join in bringing the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. Then David and all of Israel went to Bela of Judah to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord, who is enthroned between the two cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart. David and all of Israel were celebrating before God with all their might, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, and tambourines. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he laid his hand on the ark. So Uzzah died there in the presence of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of God, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God back into my care?" So David did not move the ark into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom in Gath. The ark of God remained there at Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he owned. In this chapter, it said that David consulted with the officials, the heads of the government, doctors, with other people, even with some leaders of churches, but one person that says that David never did address or get advice from was God. And so David had good intentions and had good motives, but we find that he didn't understand and didn't take the time to gain the knowledge to carry out the task that he was trying to do. And so what happens is when calamity came from David's misdirection, people were dying. People were scared, and it says that David became angry. David became afraid. Those things happened because David didn't seek out the knowledge of God on exactly how to do the thing that he felt that he wanted to do. So then chapter 14 goes into David taking wives, David making war. All this time, the Ark of the Covenant is still not where David wants it. But obviously, at some point in time, somebody had came to him. And it says in chapter 15, David now built several buildings for himself in the city of David. He also prepared a place for the Ark of God and set up a special tent for it. Then he commanded, "No one except the Levites may carry the Ark of God. The Lord has chosen them to carry the Ark of the Lord and to serve him forever." If you look back where God was ordering Aaron to build the Ark of the Covenant, we see that he was very specific about that there were 2 golden poles that went through 4 gold ringlets, and that the Ark of the Covenant was always supposed to be carried by Levites and by no one else. It couldn't be touched by anyone else. And so David brought a cart, and he brought a bunch of oxen to do the job that God said had to be done with gold poles and Levites. Obviously, at some point after calamity happened, somebody came to David and said, "David, look, we look back at how this thing's supposed to be done, and we have to make some new poles." And when you get into when Solomon starts building the temple, you see that David over exaggerated on the size of these poles that he made, because they were so long that you could see them from the outer court of the temple. So David said, you know what, how long do these poles got to be? I don't know, but we're going to make sure they're long enough. And we're going to make sure they're long enough that enough Levites can carry this thing, because it's that important to me that we get it back. And then if we skip down to verse 13, he said, "Because you Levites did not carry the ark the first time, the anger of the Lord our God burst out against us. We failed to ask God how to move it properly." And so he ordered for the Levites to purify themselves and get ready. And then David brought the Ark of God back into Jerusalem. My thing with this is, I feel like right now that a lot of the children of God have good intentions, but they're seeking their information from the wrong places. And the wrong information from the wrong places, we're seeking information from officials, from health professionals, or this, that, or the other. And what we're not seeking is God and the knowledge of what is his purpose for this right now. Is his purpose in this to bring us back, just like he was talking about in Hosea, because you've got your mind on so many other things than me, and you're going to be destroyed by your lack of knowledge. David had a heart for God, but David moved on emotion. And I believe that right now the church is moving off of emotion. They're moving off of fear, and they're not seeking what it is that God has for this time. Everything in this world is always appointed by God. There is nothing that happens without God's appointment, not his allowance. For something to be an allowance of God means that God takes a sidestep. God is always in control of all things at all times. God doesn't allow, he appoints. And so what we've got to do is find what it is, get the knowledge of the fact that God's not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. And right now, while we're so scared of things that are going on, some people say we're not scared, we're just cautious. We have to be different. God has called for his children to be children of light that shine to a dark world that's around us right now. We're called to be noticeably different. We cannot succumb to what Dr. Phil is saying, what CNN says, what everybody else is saying on how to live in fear for the coronavirus. I'm not saying not to make preparations and get food. I'm not saying that because if the government shuts down and we don't do that, then we're going to be without food. But what I'm saying is we don't need to be walking around town with a bunch of masks on. We are his people. You know what? And if I get coronavirus and I die from it, it's because God appointed that for it to be my time that way. Nothing happens outside of the appointment of God. I love y'all. Thank you.